Hi, everybody, and welcome to another episode of El Pablo FC. Today, we are going to talk about the full story, that's been buzzing the internet. The full story behind Erik Ten Hag's issues and feud with Bayer Leverkusen or Bayer 04, as the case may be. If you haven't already, please do like, share, subscribe so you don't have to miss anything that we bring to you as it relates to all things football on this channel. This is our second video as well. And we're going to continue to build as we continue to grow and evolve as a community. So you're not gonna regret subscribing. So thank you so much for subscribing. If you haven't already, please do like, share, subscribe, and leave your comments and your thoughts about about this news that we have right now regarding the situation of Erik Ten Hag. Now we're gonna breeze through this. The story of Erik Ten Hag's time at United, at United, was one that most fans don't really like to talk about. But this one is with regards to Bayer Leverkusen. It wasn't a long one. In fact, it's the shortest managerial tenure in Bundesliga history. I mean, this isn't a story about a manager who failed over time. This is a story about a complete public and historic failure that unfolded in the blink of an eye. In just 3 consecutive games, the once revered Dutch coach went from being the handpicked successor to a footballing legend to an outcast. His sacking, a shock to the world, but as we now know, inevitably be an inevitability. Sorry to get my words, trying to get my words out. An inevitability behind, the scenes. This is a story of how an impossible job, a broken dressing room, and a brutal clash with the management brought Erik Ten Hag's career to its lowest point. Now, this is a story of this is the story of the day a footballing utopia, came crashing back to reality. I mean, to understand the scale of Erik Ten Hag's failure, you must first have to understand the impossible act he was following, right? Just a few months before his arrival, Bayer Leverkusen had just completed what may be called the greatest season in German football history. Under the brilliant leadership of Xabi Alonso, they had gone undefeated the season before, winning their first ever Bundesliga title. Also, it was a fairy tale, a masterclass of tactics and team spirit, and had turned a perennial contender into an unstoppable juggernaut rather. When Alonso left for Real Madrid, he didn't just leave the team behind. He left behind a legacy, a culture, and of unity and unprecedented success that the club was desperate to maintain. Now, Erik Ten Hag wasn't just replacing a coach; he was also being asked to continue the footballing utopia. Right? The pressure was immense, and the margin of error was non-existent. Now, to make matters worse, he wasn't just he wasn't just inheriting the same team, right? The title winning squad was torn apart by a mass exodus. Stars like Florian Wirtz, Jeremie Frimpong, Jonathan Tah, and Granit Xhaka, the very backbone of Alonso's system, were all gone. Think about it. Florian Wirtz, midfield, signed by Liverpool. Jeremie Frimpong, signed by Liverpool as well, right wing back. Jonathan Tah, centre back. And then Granit Xhaka, midfield as well, defensive midfielder, sold to Sunderland. Jonathan Tah has gone to Bayern Munich. So these are the guys that were seen as the backbone of Alonso's system. Now, this wasn't a well-oiled machine that Ten Hag was taking over. It was a team in need of complete dramatic rebuild. He knew it, and he even said it himself. This process would require both time and trust. But as we now know, he was not granted any of those, whether time or trust. Now, the early cracks in the foundation started to show even before the official season began. I mean, in a preseason friendly, Ten Hag's new side was humiliated, losing 5-1 to the youth team of a Brazilian club, and that is, I think, Flamengo. Now the question is, because I saw a lot of content creators come out and say, "Oh, Ten Hag started losing again. This da. He has not even started his job and he's losing, blah 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 blah." Especially content creators on TikTok and stuff. But in truth, they forget that team was ripped apart. That team was really ripped apart. and he was starting from scratch again to build, especially with young players. They got some signings in, they got some players on loan, but it still wasn't the same team, the same core. And obviously, they were moving from a 3 at the back to a 4 at the back, and it still didn't work. So Ten Hag was, humbled by the youth team of a Brazilian club, and that Brazilian club was playing. The first team just finished playing the Club World Cup. So while preseason results are often like meaningless and all of that, it was a public signal of a deeper problem. Ten Hag's own comments didn't help, as he repeated his Harry Potter analogy from his time at Man United, saying he wasn't a magician and couldn't force the process. It was a sign of a manager already feeling overwhelmed. And it sent a worrying message to the club and the fan base, accustomed to a seamless, magical era of success that they had under Xabi Alonso. Now, when the competitive matches began, the results only got worse. His first game was a simple 4-0 win, German Cup win against a 4th division team. As a result, it counted for little in the eyes of the board. The real test came in the Bundesliga. Now, his debut at home was shocking. Basically, a 2-1 loss to Hoffenheim, a truly atrocious result that exposed massive defensive frailties. But it was also the next game that would also be the beginning of the end. Against Werder Bremen, Leverkusen were up 3-1 with a man advantage after their opponent received a red card. Now, the game should have been over, but it should have also been an easy win. Instead, the team completely imploded, squandering the lead to finish in a 3-3 draw. The team's collapse was a profound symptom of a terminal internal decay that had been festering for weeks, right? And they didn't even sign well in the transfer window. And then the final visible sign of the decay came during the match itself. On the field, an ugly public dispute broke out over who should take a penalty, with star players like Patrik Schick and Exequiel Palacios arguing amongst themselves. The team's captain, Andrich, had to step in just to restore some, semblance of order. In his post-match interview, Andrich was also absolutely scathing, saying everyone played for themselves and that he had never seen such a lack of teamwork and commitment. So there was already an internal decay. And Ten Hag himself publicly fumed, saying the players had treated his instructions as up for debate, and stunning admission. And this was a stunning admission that he had completely lost the respect of his dressing room. So that's the first symptom of disaster. Now, the on-field chaos and the public comments were the final visible signs of the sacking. Basically, people don't just see these things, they don't just read into these things, they just assume that basically he was just sacked because before he had even started, right? But there was also a deep-rooted issue, and there were deep-rooted causes for his departure, which went further back. According to leaks from German media, most notably Sport Bild, the real problems were a long list of mistakes. This is more like some leaked news with regards to, what Bayer Leverkusen left and all of that. So they say it goes further back to a list of mistakes, a long list of mistakes that convinced the board that that continued collaboration was impossible. The first major issue was a public schism over transfer policy. When star midfielder Granit Xhaka left the club, Ten Hag publicly spoke out against the move, a decision that blindsided Leverkusen sporting director and CEO. Now, they saw it as an unprofessional and a damaging situation to the club. The ultimate signal of Ten Hag's lack of influence came with the acquisition of Lucas Vazquez, a player Ten Hag was reportedly not consulted on and only met on the day of the announcement. That's a big issue, and people don't really talk about this. They focus on what was highlighted just to tarnish him. Now, this was a brutal signal that he had lost the board. the board's trust and had been reduced to an on-field coach with no influence over player recruitment. So these are the details, because Sports Bild said, and you're going to see pretty much later, Sports Bild said that he wanted to only sign players from his agency, and that is more like a leak basically from Sports Bild and from probably Bayer Leverkusen. So we need to talk about it, right? Now, the loss of authority on the field was a direct reflection of the breakdown, basically, because obviously he had no influence on player recruitment. Now, the penalty dispute and the Andrich's public comments weren't isolated incidents. They were a sign that Ten Hag's public criticism of his players after a poor result had completely unsettled the team. The players had already distanced themselves from the coach, and the chaotic scenes on the pitch were a direct consequence of a completely broken relationship. Now, Leverkusen's board didn't just act on few bad results. They acted on a complete chasm of trust. Now, the refusal of CEO Fernando Carro and sporting director Simon Rolfes to publicly back Ten Hag before the Bremen match was a symbolic act of no confidence, and it was a strategic, unavoidable decision that had already been made internally. The club's official statement was very clinical and diplomatic, calling the decision painful but necessary. But the leaks to Sports Bild told the real story, a calculated effort to justify the unprecedented sacking by painting a picture of a manager whose behavior was untenable regardless of result. Erik Ten Hag's statement, also released through his agency, was of a defiant retort, right? It was of a defiant retort. He called the decision unprecedented, same words that were used by Sports Bild and all of that, unprecedented and a complete surprise, saying that he was stunned as the rest of the soccer world. He argued that he was not given the time and trust he needed. His response framed his failure as the club's fault, not his own shortcomings, which could also be seen like that. But the club's statement was much more, reserved. Sporting director Simon Rolfes, simply said nobody wanted to take this step, and the last few weeks showed that building a new and successful team with this setup could not be achieved effectively. So yeah, it was measured, but you think about it, signing a player without consulting the manager is also a problem, because you need a player who can play the manager's system. But going on to sign a player who doesn't fit the system or who doesn't fit the plan of the club, I mean, Lucas Vazquez you're signing, is he a wing back if you had a system of 3 at the back, or is he a right back if you have a system of 4 at the back? You just don't consult the manager, you go right ahead and sign. So this is not me trying to make an excuse for a Ten Hag, but also, look at it from both ways and be, very partial, right? So like that, they said it could not be achieved effectively. CEO Fernando Carro also called the decision painful but necessary, and these statements were presented which made it easy for the club to make a decision as a measured one, a professional reaction to an unworkable solution, while Ten Hag's was a personal and emotional reaction in his statement. So this is more like just comparing both statements. Now, the divergence of these narratives is key to understanding the end of this brief, brutal tenor. Ten Hag blamed a lack of mutual trust. The club's official position was corporate. Captain Andrich's comment also provided the critical ground-level evidence that supported the club's decision, and the leaks to German media explained the why behind the club's swift and painful action. Ten Hag's 3-game competitive spell is a historical footnote that the shortest managerial tenure a historical footnote of the shortest managerial tenure in Bundesliga history. His dismissal, particularly after a difficult exit from Manchester United, has left a significant stain on his professional reputation. His public fallout with both the board and the players at Leverkusen compounds the narrative of his previous struggles. His public criticism of his players and his inability to manage their egos mirrored issues from his previous job. And the Harry Potter comment, also used at both clubs, was telling was a telling sign of a manager feeling overwhelmed by the scale of his task, right? Now, Leverkusen's board and players, having just experienced the polar opposite under Alonso, were acutely sensitive to any hint of internal conflict. This created a situation where Ten Hag's historical weaknesses were exposed immediately and brutally, leaving no room, for a grace period or even a chance to course correct. Now, the confluence of failures from his Manchester United tenure and his brief spell at Leverkusen had led to a sobering conclusion that he will likely need a rehab stint, possibly in a less scrutinized environment, to rebuild his reputation. Now, what do you guys think? This is more like a full-blown story of what happened, because the media might want to push a narrative, might want to push something that will, tarnish Ten Hag's image. Even content creators come out and say stuff without actually doing any deep research with regards to what really happened to Ten Hag. But this is not me trying to defend, but obviously this is a human being we're talking about, a human being who has gone through a whole lot, and then we tend to, assume that this is, the case and stuff. But in the end, it was basically a brutal, historic failure for both the coach and the club. So everybody has his own part to play in all of this, with no Bundesliga club ever having appointed a new coach and then removed him after just 2 games or 3 games, as the case may be. So let me know your thoughts and feelings in the comment section. We're going to be doing similar deep dives like this, just to break down certain things and talk about details that most people tend to miss and the media tends to just put out without actually doing any further research, or to put out anything with regards to just whatever they want because they want to create a narrative, or put out anything without, even though they know the full details, but they put out what they want the media to see. So let me know your thoughts and feelings in the comment section. We're going to break it down further if there's any other news and stuff. But yeah, thank you so much for liking, sharing, and subscribing. We're building a community here. I'll see you on the next one. Take care. Goodbye, and have a good one. God bless.